ask everyone to take their seats. I'd like to call to order the June 2nd Board of Supervisors meeting. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Carroll. Supervisor Elias.
Presente.
Supervisor Miller. Here. Supervisor Valadez.
Present.
Chair Bronson.
Here, let the record show that Supervisor Carroll is not in attendance. His mother passed away Sunday, and he and his family are in our thoughts and prayers. I want to, before we rise for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd like to take a moment of personal privilege and recognize that Margaret Kemsky, who was a GOP pollster, passed away last week also. She was a longtime Republican who, according to many of us who knew her, told us what we needed to hear and not what we wanted to hear. She died after a long battle with breast cancer, and her family, and certainly she is in our prayers. And on another sad note, Carol McGorry, a Marana Town Councilwoman, is seriously ill and in the hospital, and I would hope that as we pray that we remember her in our prayers and that she has a speedy recovery. And with that, I'll recognize Supervisor Elias.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to mention a few words about Supervisor Carroll's mom, who was a very kind woman who was a public servant her entire life as a public health nurse in Cook County. And she bore 6 children. 2 of those children died in childbirth, and she raised 4 children, and they all work hard to try and make America a better place. So we should try and keep her in our mind today and in our hearts. I'd also mention another community activist who died over the weekend, and that was Bernie Starks. He's a great guy and participated in many events throughout our community all the time, was selfless in his giving, was really the person who organized the Juneteenth Festival, probably for the better part of 30 years, and that festival is more than 40 years old now. So Bernie was a big part of it, and really a fine gentleman, retired lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force, just a person who believed in all of us and believed in our community. So please, if we could all keep those folks in our hearts and in our minds, and especially during our invocation here this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Valadez.
Madam Chair, point of personal privilege, I did want to echo the sentiments that expressed by you and by Supervisor Elias for the Carroll family. I did have a chance, I think as many of us did, to talk to Bray yesterday and offer our condolences. And certainly he was very close to his family. I also wanted to echo the sentiments that Supervisor Elias talked about Bernie Starks. He was not only a fellow alumnus of Pueblo High School, where I also went to high school, but he worked there for many years, and last year retired, where he had the mariachi actually serenade him on his last day. He was an outstanding community member, and fairly recently I actually had the honor of awarding him a District 2 Leadership Award. He was very involved, and frankly his passing I think will affect many of the things this community does. Finally, I think we also need to mention Don Shropshire, who also passed last week. And I remember when I was a student at the University of Arizona, he was Regent Shropshire back then, longtime CEO of Tucson Medical Center. And may they all rest in peace.
And one more person passed away, I think yesterday, Dan Ryan. Yeah, and what was it? What was the high school football thing he did?
Well, yes.
Something Friday. I can't remember what it was called, but it was quite known.
He put on a special event on the news on Channel 4. He was the sportscaster there for more than 20 years. And Friday football nights.
Friday football night.
That's what they called it. And
really high school football.
Did a great job focusing on local athletes and youth finding success out there on the football field. And he'll be missed by all of us as well.
Thank you. And with that, if we would rise for the invocation to be offered today by Pastor Keith Hardy, Abounding Grace Lutheran Church, with the Pledge of Allegiance to follow, led by Supervisor Valadez.
Gracious God, we lift up before you today all of those who we have mentioned here, especially the Carroll family and the other families who have experienced loss. We lift up before you those in need of your healing power. And we ask your blessing upon this meeting of the Board of Supervisors. We ask, creative God, that you would grant them a bit of your creativity in seeking solutions and opportunities for this county. We ask your blessing upon them, Redeemer God, that you might help them to find ways to address the problems which are faced by our complex society. And we ask you, sustaining God, to sustain them with your power, with your wisdom, and with your graciousness. May your love flow to us and through us and out to those who are most in need of it. We ask in your most holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And now, can we please meet Lacey, Officer Foster?
Good morning. This is Lacey. Lacey's a 5-year-old Cocker Spaniel. She came to us as a stray, as hard as that is to believe, but she's a party color, so for people who aren't familiar with her coat pattern, it's a partial color of more than one, and so she's a red and white party cocker, and she is available at PAC right now. Standard adoption fees apply to her. She is spayed and can go home immediately.
And Ted, what do you think? Is this a soccer mascot or what?
Well, I already have 2 dogs, so I don't know that I have room for a third. We can certainly get the word out.
Okay,
That would be wonderful. As much help as she can get, she definitely deserves it.
and how long has she been at the kennel?
Luckily, not that long, only since the 28th, and ideally she'll find a home quickly and make some room in a kennel for the next animal that needs a home.
Very good. Well, Ted, I tell you, the soccer guys need a mascot.
Looks like a great one, too.
Thanks.
She has lovely, soulful eyes, that's for sure.
Indeed.
Well,
Thank you, officer.
Thank you so much for having us.
All right, we're going to move on to presentations and proclamations. Item 5, proclamation, Referee Appreciation Day, declaring Saturday, June 6th to be Referee Appreciation Day in Pima County. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Are there any objections? If not, Supervisor Elias, would you like to present the proclamation to Ted Schmidt and Pat Dunham? And is Charlie here? No.
No, it doesn't look like he made it.
Okay.
I tell you, it's so nice to be able to honor referees who help our kids participate in sports and really help keep things in order. And that's a real big part of the learning process that goes on as a part of the Junior Soccer League as well as the Soccer Academy that's going on right now. Fairness in sports and teaching our kids good sportsmanship, nothing could be more important. And I know that Ted and folks have worked really hard on developing respect for referees and trying to get parents to behave on the sidelines. It's often more difficult than getting the kids to behave on the sidelines. So that's part of what we're doing here today, and we're also going to be out at the FC Tucson game on Saturday at halftime, honoring these volunteer referees who have really participated in helping our young people learn a sense of fairness and correct behavior in a difficult situation. I don't think anybody up here likes losing, so I don't suppose anybody does, even when you're young. So anyways, whereas, since it can be trying to be a referee at youth soccer games, and entities such as the Pima County Junior Soccer League have struggled to employ enough referees to officiate its matches involving 6,000 children in 13 clubs. And whereas there have always been penalties for players and coaches who abuse or excessively disagree with the referees, but not for the parents on the sidelines. And whereas the referees who officiate junior league matches often lack adequate training and evaluation. Whereas the Pima County Junior Soccer League sought to remedy these problems with a new program called Respect the Game. And whereas Respect the Game requires all league coaches, players, and players' parents to sign a code of conduct to be eligible for a season and post signs at all games that list everyone's responsibilities and call for mutual respect and understanding. And whereas Respect the Game employs field marshals in fluorescent shirts to patrol sidelines during games to enforce the code of conduct, which allows for penalties against parental offenders. And whereas Respect the Game includes a Rate the Ref program that awards points to referees based on coaches' ratings and also awards points to referees for attendance at meetings and training sessions. Whereas Pima County Junior Soccer League believes publicly recognizing referees for excellence helps instill among all sports fans a higher level of respect for those who officiate sporting events. And whereas Pima County Junior Soccer League very much appreciates the hard work of all its referees and will recognize the league referees who earned the most Rate the Ref points at a halftime match on June 6, 2015 at Pima County's Keno Sports Complex. Now therefore be it resolved that the Pima County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims Saturday, June 6, 2015 to be Referee Appreciation Day in Pima County, passed and adopted this second day of June, 2015. Let's give a nice round of applause for these folks.
I just want to say that we take for granted, I think, in this community how blessed we are to have these folks on our Board of Supervisors and our county administrator who really are putting the best interest of our kids at the forefront. I mean, you look at the bond package that we're going to get passed here before too long. There's so much in there to benefit all youth sports. This Respect the Game program, I'm really proud of this. This is started right here in Tucson. It's going statewide this fall, and I predict it'll go nationwide. You all know that the behavior by spectators at youth events is getting out of hand, has gone way over the top, and we're doing something about it. We had a 40% drop in instances of improper behavior just for the first year of this program. So I really appreciate the Board of Supervisors giving us this recognition. A very important part of this is to instill a culture in our community of respecting and honoring our game officials. And this is a big step in that direction, and we really appreciate your support. Thank you all very much.
And I think we have to thank Tad and all the folks he associates with because you kind of define youth sports in this community. We want to thank you for all the effort you put in, and I know you're just compensated so incredibly for it.
Thank you all.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 6, a presentation of a proclamation proclaiming the week of June 14th through the 19th, 2015 to be Monsoon Safety Awareness Week. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any objections? Hearing none. Supervisor Valadez, would you make the presentation? And if we can get Ken and Andy up here.
You know, it's a real pleasure to do this presentation for Monsoon Appreciation Week.
Yeah, we appreciate monsoons. Thank you, Supervisor Valadez. We definitely could use a monsoon today.
Would catch that one. Whereas the National Weather Service monitors severe weather and provides warnings to people within Pima County 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And whereas the National Weather Service works in close cooperation with local media outlets to provide critical weather information as quickly as possible to protect lives and property from hazards of severe weather. And whereas, due to its location and geography, Pima County frequently experiences thunderstorm-generated wind, dust, electrical storms, and dangerous flash floods during the summer monsoon season. all of which pose a considerable threat to the community. And whereas public safety during the monsoon season begins with teamwork between community partners and emergency responder agencies, united to advance the message of turn around, don't drown, to save lives and to promote flood safety awareness. And whereas the goal of the National Weather Service is to work with public safety and the media partners and volunteer organizations, which include the Pima County Office of Emergency Management, Pima County Regional Flood Control District, and Pima County Sheriff's Department, Pima Association of Governments, the Tohono Nation, Sheriff's Auxiliary Volunteers, Stormwater Management Sections from the City of Tucson and the town of Marana, American Red Cross, Tucson Electric Power, Vaisala, the U.S. Forest Service, Volunteer Patrol and Volunteer Naturalists from Sabino Canyon, Friends of Sabino Canyon, the Southern Arizona Rescue Association, along with local law enforcement agencies, fire departments, and fire districts to inform the community of what to do when severe weather associated with the summer monsoon season strikes. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Pima County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims the week of June 14, 2015 through June 19, 2015 to be Monsoon Safety Awareness Week in Pima County, and encourages all citizens to acquaint themselves with severe weather safety information and to use these life-saving recommendations to protect themselves and their families from the hazards that accompany the summer monsoon season. Passed and adopted the second day of June 2015. Now I'm sure we'll all look forward to the predictions of when the monsoons will begin this year.
Who's going to take the risk?
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank the Board of Supervisors for, once again, issuing this proclamation for Monsoon Safety Awareness Week. And also thank Andy and the board, the Pima County Office of Emergency Management. National Weather Service is grateful for the partnership we have with your office. And you heard all the other different agencies listed along with the media around in Southeast Arizona that work with us to help to try to prevent fatalities and injuries and property damage from the type of thunderstorms that we get during the monsoon. Unfortunately, in 2014, in Southeast Arizona, we had 4 thunderstorm-related fatalities. 2 of those were within Pima County, 1 flash flood fatality and 1 lightning fatality. And we're always deeply saddened by that those tragedies do occur, but it does serve as a reminder to all of us to make sure we know what to do when severe weather strikes. To that end, we will be having a monsoon safety fair with many of those agencies that were listed on this proclamation. We'll all be getting together at Park Place Mall on Thursday, June 18th, and we'll be available there to discuss weather safety and other safety aspects of the monsoon. And come down from 10 to 2, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., come down there and join us. Thank you.
Any predictions?
Predictions? I was once told never make a forecast unless you have to. Like, I have to if I'm right here on camera. Really, the thinking is right now that we may have kind of a somewhat lackluster start. It always kind of starts off with a bang, but then you kind of get an inactive period, and maybe trending toward wetter again during the latter part of the monsoon, August, September, which we kind of had last year. So maybe the overall is for kind of a wetter normal, for most places to be wetter than normal again this year.
Wonderful, you are on camera.
Right, exactly, so I had to do it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We could ask him about hurricane season too. Yeah, it started.
It started in Eastern Pacific on May 15th, and we have 2 of them out there already well south of us. So maybe get a little bit of moisture up here before the monsoon officially begins.
Very good. And when is the official start of the monsoon?
June 15th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I want to move out of order to a presentation on the addendum of a proclamation recognizing the day of Saturday, June 13th, 2015, to be a day to recognize soul music in Pima County. I'll move the item. Are there any, there's motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Supervisor Elias, would you do the presentation to Tanisha and Kevin Hamilton?
Thank you very much, and thank you, Board, for passing this proclamation. Soul music, an important component of our cultural tradition here in Southern Arizona, and I'm very proud to stand here with two folks who have worked really hard in the last 4 years and more to promote soul music here in Tucson and Southern Arizona, and they've done a great job. And you know, we could go through a list of great performers that have influenced us in our lives. But I think the truth is this, at least for this supervisor. And that's that soul music is what I reach for when I'm feeling happy. And soul music is what I reach for when I'm feeling sad. Because it helps my hips start to move a little bit, it helps my feet to shuffle a little bit, and it puts my head in a very positive place. All of which is important to all of us. And that's what the arts do for us. So thank you very much for everything you've contributed. I'd like to also thank you both for being good friends too, because that's an important facet of life as well. So, without further ado, whereas Southwest Soul Circuit is an organization of individuals committed to uplifting, inspiring, and entertaining Southwest communities by combining music and community service through live concerts, festivals, and studio recordings. And whereas Southwest Soul Circuit has remained true to its original mission, vision, and goals to entertain, galvanize, and educate hundreds of people every year. And whereas it is important to provide family-friendly entertainment, to provide platforms and outlets to artists of all ages to improve the quality of life in the Southwest for underserved communities, and to build a network of individuals who desire to create more harmonious communities around great music and good times. And whereas it is especially important to preserve cultural heritage through the traditions of soul music, which have been the focus of Southwest Soul Circuit's performances at Armory Park during Second Saturdays, downtown urban street festivals over the last 4 years. Now therefore be it resolved that the Pima County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims June 13, 2015 to be a day to recognize soul music in Pima County and encourages all Pima County residents to join the Southwest Soul Circuit movement, and particularly through its Second Saturdays Downtown Urban Street Festival performances, passed and adopted this second day of June 2015. And I would add that Tanisha's a great vocalist, and that Kevin's a great composer and performer and singer himself. So if you would both please say a few words for us, I'd appreciate it this morning. Put you on the spot, Tanisha.
I'd like to first say thank you to the board for proclaiming the day for Southwest Soul Circuit and soul music. I'd like to thank Mr. Richard Elias for being a friend and a really good supporter of all that we do in the community. And I'd like to also thank my business partner and my wife, and wish her happy birthday today. I'd be remiss if I did not do that today. In 2006, we started Southwest Soul Circuit because we saw that there was a need for cultural music, culturally relevant R&B, contemporary soul music, classic soul music, and socially conscious hip hop. Over the last 10 years, we've probably traveled 250,000 miles from Dallas to San Diego, taking local artists and national artists on the road with us. And you know, we spread joy and love through music. You know, food and music usually brings us together more than anything else. So we just enjoy having a good time. We enjoy sharing our gifts, and we enjoy encouraging people to just, you know, have a little hope and faith in humanity, and just to continue to be good to each other. So we thank you all for acknowledging us here today.
And what was the date? June 16th? 13th. Second Saturday. Okay, got it.
Well, I don't have much to say, but thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Elias. It means a lot when you put your heart and soul into something, and finally, you know, you're able to get a pat on the back for something that you believe in, and we hope that each of you kind of think back to a good soul music song that made you feel a little better. And that's what we're about, the Southwest Soul Circuit, uplifting, inspiring, and entertaining our community through music and community service. Thank you so much.
And if we'd have known it was your birthday, Tanisha, we would have had Mr. Huckleberry sing Las Mañanitas to you, but, you know.
It's my birthday all day.
He's got to practice some.
Okay, we now come to calls of the audience. Mary Murphy, and I would remind everybody, you have 3 minutes, and please abide by the rules of civility.
Good morning, board. Well, I saved an article about bond. This is back in March, that vote on bond could be near. Well, it is near. But one of the things I want to do today is to dispel a myth that has grown up in Green Valley for the entire 50 years. The rumor is that, the myth is that Green Valley was founded by teachers. It was not founded by teachers. The New York Teachers Union Pension Fund came out here and looked at Green Valley as a possible investment for their people, and teachers said no to Green Valley. And it was a good decision when they said no and went back to New York, because the whole operation was bankrupt within 4 years. In 1967, the FHA foreclosed on Green Valley. They went into bankruptcy. And for 6 years, Green Valley was a federal housing project. This bond has very little in it for Green Valley. Expanding a library in Green Valley, when you're closing libraries elsewhere, that doesn't work. You're closing libraries, but you're going to expand one in Green Valley with this bond. And in addition to our deteriorated drainage issues, we're missing a grocery store. I clipped this from just Sunday's paper. A neighborhood is losing its food city. For 35 years, my old neighborhood in Green Valley had a grocery store. It has been without a grocery store for the past 15 years. And these Walmart neighborhood markets, they're bringing life back to neighborhoods that don't have grocery stores. And gas stations, the Walmart neighborhood market. I'd love to see one of these in Green Valley, the neighborhood market. And the other myth that I have to dispel is that the county, in conjunction with the Green Valley Council, are taking such good care of Green Valley. They have a committee called Traffic and Arroyos. They are the flood control branch of your operation down in Green Valley. There's miscommunication, there's distrust. So I want to dispel that myth, that Green Valley is well taken care of. And I threw in some lyrics from Chicago, a song called Chicago, and it goes back to the early days after the 1968 Democratic Convention and stuff like that. Just the positions people were taking, you know, pro-government, anti-government. We had the draft and things we were dealing with then. And all I want to see is that Green Valley gets its fair share, and it doesn't look like it's getting its fair share out of this bond. The people should be aware of that. Expanding a library when you're closing others. Oh, and that Kanoa historic site. I don't know what's the end result, what that is, but it's, excuse me, the best part of that ranch is long gone. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry Otabani.
Madam Chairman, Board of Supervisors, my name is Jerry Otaboni and I live in Oro Valley, and good morning. I had the pleasure of attending the Marana Chamber of Commerce meeting last Wednesday morning, where Mr. Huckleberry spoke, and I asked him how much money we in Pima County receive from the HER funds, and where did the money go? Well, there are approximately 100 businessmen and women in the audience, and I thought it interesting that what Mr. Huckleberry said at the meeting was different and did not match the letter that Mr. Huckleberry sent to a constituent explaining where the HER funds went. Mr. Huckleberry also stated that many of the roads were new, but according to Mayor Honey and others on the radio, Sendero Road and Abra Valley Road have been around for 70 years and has always been repaired. Yet the Board of Supervisors threw Aunt Day under the bus, the one who usually voted with them and went along to get along, And what did that get her? Years and years and years and years of bad, non-repaired roads for her constituents in District 1. I wonder where the money went. Recently, the Ford Board of Supervisors swept away road money and gave it to District 4. Excuse me, District 1 pays 33% of the county taxes, District 4 pays 23%, and the other one's 16, 18, 13 approximately for everybody else. Even though Mr. Huckleberry was assuring the voters of District 1, if they voted for the bonds, it would be different. Well, if you look at the bonds, there's an asterisk stating that they don't know where the streets are going to be fixed. Due to past performance where 4 supervisors swept money from District 1 and put the money wherever they wanted to, and Mr. Huckleberry just took $1.9 million of the road repair money away, can we trust them to keep their word? Vote no on this bond. Thank you.
Christopher Cole.
Hello again, Christopher Cole, First Vice Chair, Pima County Libertarian Party. Addendum item number 3, we're talking about wages. There is one factor, and only one factor, that is valid in determining someone's wage. And I'll bet nobody up there knows what it is. It has to be a rhetorical question because this being called to the public, you can't respond. So I'll tell you what that one factor is. The value of the employee to the employer. Everything else? No, it's not valid. If you, as my employee, are worth $10 an hour to me, forcing me to pay $15 an hour is stealing from me. If you're worth $15 an hour to me, I pay you $10 an hour, I'm stealing from you. Unless you, as the employee, decide that there's other factors involved that are more important than that extra $5 an hour. Unions treat workers as cogs, interchangeable. The most barely competent employee is treated exactly the same by the union as the most highly skilled and valuable employee. They're interchangeable. And what is good for one employee in terms of wages may not be good for another employee, but to the unions, they don't care. Pay everybody the same, based upon seniority or some other factor that rarely has any significant validity. Seniority is important only when it involves an increase in expertise, and skill, and capability. But increases in skill, and capability, and expertise, they don't matter to unions. They don't matter to the law. The law says this much is the minimum wage, irregardless of, well, I should not have said irregardless, that's not really a word, it's regardless. Regardless of what the business factors are. So when addendum item 3 comes up, if you're not considering the value of each individual employee to you as the employer, and you're considering some other factors, you're not considering valid factors. You know, when the Board of Supervisors saw those many months ago, well, I'm over my time. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Danielle, excuse me, with Tucson Young Professionals.
Good morning, Board. I'm here on behalf of the Tucson Young Professionals, and one of our goals is to continue to promote, attract, and retain professionals in Tucson. And wanted just to bring up a few issues that are straight to our mission, and that really hinder and our ability to keep our young professionals here in Tucson from all different aspects, from colleges and from bringing and attracting talent to Tucson. One is definitely education. Our members are very in tune to the education qualities that we offer. When we are trying to attract talent to Tucson, this is a big issue for us. So definitely just wanted to bring this up to your attention. Infrastructure is another key item that affects our abilities to bring in, and they all kind of work together. So education, infrastructure, and jobs. Jobs would be one of our big concerns as well. To continue to have a successful, young, vibrant culture, we have to continue to bring high-paying jobs. And I feel like all three of these things go together. So education, infrastructure, and jobs are three of the key items that we're looking at to continue to promote and attract people to our Tucson community. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our speakers that called to the audience. We have one executive session item, which is on the addendum, agenda item 2. I'd entertain a motion to move into exec. Motion and a sec. If there are no objections, we'll convene in exec and reconvene in regular session at the sound of the gavel.
I'm glad to be feeling better.
Once again, good morning. We're back in regular session. Counselor, we had one executive session item. Counselor.
Madam Chair, members of the board, item 2 on the addendum is an executive session for legal advice and direction regarding a settlement offer in Pima County versus Ray Lopez. County attorney seeks direction on whether to proceed with the settlement offer or counter offer as discussed in executive session.
What's the pleasure of the board?
I'll move the county attorney's recommendation.
Second.
Motion and a second to move the county attorney's recommendation, which is to proceed as discussed in executive session. Are there any objections?
Yes, I object.
One objection. Any further objections? Motion carries 3-1. Moving on to Board of Supervisors sitting as other boards. Flood Control District Board, riparian, item 8, riparian mitigation. What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair, I'll move the item, Flood Control District, item number 8, riparian habitat mitigation plan.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 9, contract with the City of Tucson to provide for construction and maintenance of Sabino Canyon Road Bridge at Pantano Wash. What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair, I'll move item 9.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to Library District Board and the contract with the Sahuarita Water Company LLC.
Move approval.
Motion and a second to approve. You really want to spend $2? I mean, how much did it cost us to put it on the agenda?
More than $2.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to the Board of Supervisors, sitting as the Board of Supervisors approval of the consent calendar. What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair, I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
In its entirety. I'll second. Are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 12, intergovernmental agreements with the City of Tucson regarding animal care and enforcement services and Sheriff's Department incarceration of municipal prisoners. Mr. Huckleberry, any discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board, both of these intergovernmental agreements are standard intergovernmental agreements we have with the City of Tucson to provide services to them. The first one that I'll talk about, because I don't think there's any issue, is the Sheriff's Department intergovernmental agreement for prisoner housing. As you can see in the cover memo, we recalculate based on last year's experiences, the prisoner housing rate and the booking rates. Those are going to increase slightly this coming year, fiscal 15-16. But they're comparable or lower than similar cost in Maricopa County. There had been a lot of discussion between the Sheriff's Department and the city with regard to certain modifications. So we've indicated that we cannot make the modifications. As indicated in a phone conversation, I believe this morning, the City of Tucson has said that they will agree to the county's responses with regard to the intergovernmental agreement for prisoner housing. So we will simply carry over that intergovernmental agreement and place it on your agenda for the 16th for final approval.
So what is the action we take today then regarding
It's
that?
what I did is, because I knew we had these continuing discussions with the city, obviously we needed board direction as to how to proceed if we continue to have an impasse in certain areas, and so that's why it's on the agenda.
So at this point, there's no
action.
particular action, and we'll have the item with the contract on 16th of June. Okay.
Madam Chair?
Supervisor Miller.
I just had a quick question for Mr. Huckleberry. You're talking about this table 2 where they had these items that they were requesting and they're agreeing to the actual denial of most of them, all of them, I guess.
Yes, Madam Chair, Supervisor Miller, yes.
Thank you.
The second IGA is one that's with animal care, and this is where we would ask for some board direction, and again, with a conversation this morning with the city manager, there is, we would think, somewhat agreement with regard to how to proceed. The first is that what I've recommended to you is that because of the either uncertainty or clarity that was not completely crystal clear with the city with regard to county administrative overhead, that we waive that component. That's $472,000. The city has said, well, they don't agree with the waiver. They don't think the charges were valid. So the outcome is the same. It doesn't make any difference. With regard to the other item that's in dispute is the issue associated with the additional shelter capacity. And we could not have transitioned to the model we have today in animal care without that additional shelter capacity. And that's the cost that I, in my recommendation to you, talked about reducing that capital expense cost in the city over 3 fiscal years. They indicate as of this morning that they're perfectly willing to pay that amount in full with the, I assume, new intergovernmental agreement or this intergovernmental agreement, if they want to modify one in the last, 2 weeks of the fiscal year. I just assume we place it in next fiscal years as a line item to be paid, and therefore that would be paid by the city of Tucson.
Let me ask, so they wanted to pay, it's approximately, you are going to divide it over 3 fiscal years, and it's about $80,000 a year, approximately. So if I understood what you said, they're willing to essentially write a check for us, to us, July 1 for $240,000, for approximately just under $240,000. Is that what you said?
Madam Chair, yes, that's, I would assume they're willing to make that payment. The distinction is do they amend the existing IGA that's only in effect for another 28 days, where we simply place it in next year's IGA.
But they're willing to do a
They're
lump
willing
sum.
to pay it as lump sum, so we don't need to spread it over 3 years. All I think we need to do is, and I think they have agreed to pay our administrative overhead going forward, because it's important to understand that we pay their administrative overhead in other intergovernmental agreements with the city, so I think that's an appropriate, fair way in which to resolve this particular impasse. And I think that based on our conversations this morning with the city manager, that if we agree to either way or assume it was never valid, it doesn't matter either way, and agree to accept the full payment for the shelter capacity increase and place it in next year's intergovernmental agreement. In addition, we've been much more specific about our charges in next year's intergovernmental agreement with the City of Tucson, which hopefully will eliminate any misunderstandings that might occur in the future.
I guess I have some concerns. I mean, I understand your rationale for waiving the overhead charges for 2 years, FY14 and FY15. However, I have concerns because we did not waive it for the other jurisdictions. And it's an equity issue to me and a fairness issue. If we didn't waive it for other jurisdictions, and the city refuses to waive for us with the sewer bills, the wastewater bills, waive their overhead. It seems to me they have some cognitive disconnect. They can charge overhead, but we can't, and we want to forgive them because they behave properly. I guess we're rewarding bad behavior, and that bothers me. Supervisor Valdez.
Madam Chair, Mr. Huckleberry, you and I have talked about the concern, some of the concerns that I have here on this issue going forward and both retroactively. Following up on Supervisor Bronson's comment, what would happen if we simply decided not to pay the overhead on our sewer bill?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Valdez, I would assume the city would just simply stop sending or collecting the bills for us and transferring our share of their aggregate water bill.
So then, go ahead.
And when they chose unilaterally not to pay the overhead, what did we do?
We had a number of meetings with them trying to explain why it was a reasonable charge, why it was included, and why it's now 2 fiscal years old. It's not as if it's a new issue.
So basically we did nothing.
We didn't take any action.
Any assertive action.
Now, it's been asserted that we didn't have an IGA. How long have we had the existing IGA?
We've had an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Tucson regarding animal care since, I believe, 1961. So the rules are, I think, fairly well understood by all parties.
So the allegation that it's unclear is an allegation?
It is an allegation that we dispute. Now we will put a line item called administrative overhead.
What, under ARS, what are we required to provide in terms of animal care?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Valdez, for incorporated places, nothing. And so we operate on the consent of jurisdictions providing these services inside municipal corporations.
You made a statement a few moments ago that forgiving almost $500,000 would be the only fair way going forward.
Explain.
You know, when one sibling loans another sibling money, and one sibling decides, nah, you know what, I'm not going to pay you back, and say, don't worry about it. It may be brotherly love, but it's not fair. So I'd stay away from saying it's fair. I also have concerns in terms of the equity. If we're going to forgive the City of Tucson's administrative overhead, then we have to consider doing it for the other jurisdictions or not at all. Frankly, I understand the interpretation of not understanding administrative overhead is convenient. One might assert that it's even fictitious, But if you've got every other jurisdiction that read it correctly, and only one that didn't, I have some very serious concerns of going in that direction.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, let Mr. Huckleberry respond to Supervisor Valdez and then Supervisor Miller.
Yes, Madam Chair and Supervisor Valdez. The City of Tucson is about 56% of our animal care business, and the other jurisdictions are relatively minor, probably in the aggregate less than 10 to 15%. Therefore, you're correct. If we were to do this equitably, we would waive that administrative overhead for the other jurisdictions. My guess is it's in the range of $40,000 to $60,000.
For all the jurisdictions
Yes.
combined. Thank you. Supervisor Miller.
The question regarding the agreement with the tent, did we amend the agreement prior to purchasing the tent and communicate that effectively to the City of Tucson? Because our current agreement does not have a tent in there identified, and we did that after their agreement was signed. So was the agreement amended in writing and communicated to the City of Tucson prior to purchasing that tent?
Madam Chair and Supervisor Miller, it's a 2-year intergovernmental agreement, so the intergovernmental agreement was entered into long before we changed the shelter model. And what we did is basically communicate with everyone, and it was a well-known fact and fairly well reported in the media that Pima County was changing our sheltering model to one of adoption as opposed to euthanasia. We communicated clearly with all of the, let's say, rescue organizations that we work with, all of the community groups we work with. So it should not have come as any shock to the City of Tucson that we incurred that cost for additional shelter capacity. There are about 6 or 7 different references in the intergovernmental agreement that deal with increasing adoption, reducing euthanasia, more humane treatment, additional medical care costs, all the things that I guess you could say a tent is not mentioned in the intergovernmental agreement, but increasing adoption, increasing capacity, more humane sheltering concepts are all embedded in the intergovernmental agreement.
So the policy issues are there, and it is the board's prerogative to exercise direction regarding those policy issues. Is that correct?
Yes.
Madam Chair, Mr. Huckleberry, so we did not have a signed agreed to, we're going to pay these additional costs from the City of Tucson. The communication via the media, I understand that. I was here, I heard it. However, that and having a signed agreement are 2 different things. The other question I have on table 4, page 6, you talked about a spay-neuter dispute because we didn't used to charge them. And it's $62,500 for the current year. Have we amended the agreement to incorporate prior billings to them? Is that going to be specifically identified and itemized as the table you have here is table 4, very clear. We're going to make sure, I saw that you're going to incorporate that into the agreement, which I think is a good thing, that we're having that clear communication with them. Are they willing to pay the spay-neuter fees? Because apparently we weren't charging them spay-neuter fees.
Madam Chair and Supervisor Miller, yes, we've always charged them spay-neuter fees, and I think they misinterpreted a billing and took it off an actual enforcement billing and assumed it was spay-neuter when it never was, and then repaid it. And then down in their organization somehow felt that they paid for spay-neuter already. So I think we've got that miscommunication straightened out as I talked to in my memorandum. We are going to itemize it and the number is correct because they get credit for, again, many of the donations that we have gotten. And I think that's what, probably is the most disconcerting for me is that had it not been for the efforts of animal care and increasing the donations to $500,000, this bill would have been an additional $250,000 to the City of Tucson.
Right. So prior to this year, it says here on the memo, community spay-neuter expenses were borne solely by the county and not passed on to the City of Tucson. So I think that it's note number 2 under table 4 on page 6 of your June 2nd memo. And I think that may be where, if things weren't clearly delineated, and I think this is great that we're doing this now, to make sure that the communication's clear, that we're billing them for everything they should be billed for. It appears that the county was absorbing that.
Madam Chair and Supervisor Miller, yes, you're correct. What we did is, you recall, we increased our licensing fees from $12 to $15, and Pima County unilaterally dedicated that increase to spay neuter. We asked the other jurisdictions. Oro Valley said yes. Marana, I don't think, said anything, probably nothing. And the city of Tucson, we asked, and they balked. They said no. So they saved that by reducing their general fund support to animal care. What we then did is we entered into the CAT program, the spay, the neuter, the trap and release program, which was really benefiting almost entirely the city of Tucson. And they again didn't want to participate because they had to change their own codes because of the way it's written. We operate on a consent intergovernmental agreement. It took a pretty good effort by the nonprofit foundation associated with trap and release and the community to get the city to understand what that grant was all about and agree to it. So that's embedded now in the spay and neuter program.
Okay, that was a question I had, was the Community Cats program. So this $200,000 that was required matching from us every year for this program is incorporated in here, and the city of Tucson is clear about how that's going to work with the Community Cats program.
Yes, Madam Chair and Supervisor Miller, yes, I believe so. I think that a lot of these numbers that on the previous page are in arrears are related to billing cycles from month to month, and so I don't think we have any difficulty with those. And the fact that we will now itemize these in the intergovernmental agreement to make sure everybody has clear understanding of what the bills are about should hopefully reduce the city's concerns in the future.
Are you going to itemize the Community Cats program and have that in this table as well? And it is the majority going to the city of Tucson, I recall that when we discussed this to begin with. And then the other concern that I had was they went from roughly 3.9 million up to 4.8 million estimated for 15-16. Are we expecting further increases when the facility comes online, because you're going to need people to maintain the building, et cetera? And are we communicating that to all of the stakeholders ahead of time so that they can be prepared with their budgets? Hey, your costs are going to go up, because this is a 31% increase just by changing the philosophy and also adding a director and the veterinarian and other employees that have been added to date.
Yes, Madam Chair, if you look at the amount received last year versus the amount billed, you'll see that we have the arrears and we have the tent. So if you add those two together, there's $700,000 of that cost. So
From last year's bill.
Yeah, they
so
just
that would
work.
take their normal billing down to 3.2.
No, it take their normal bill, what they paid last year.
Okay, gotcha.
And so if you add that to what they should have paid, it would be closer to the 4.5, getting close to the 4.8.
But that tent is a one-time purchase.
Yes, it is, and so you are going to have some additional costs, but those are pretty modest, and they're probably about as high as they're going to get.
Are they going to increase when we bring that building online?
When we bring that building online, we believe that they will stay the same, stabilize or go down. Because as I think we talked about earlier, we're operating almost two separate facilities in two different locations. Very inefficient, very ineffective, high operating cost. Just your utility cost to keep a tent cool is 10 times more than in any regular building.
Thank you.
Let me see, Madam Supervisor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It just seems to me that this is a good example of how intergovernmental bickering can cause big problems in the money behind it all. And that's a real problem. But I think what's lost in the discussion is that we've made great improvements in how we deal with animals in our community. And those improvements, I think, need to continue. There is cost associated with that, yes. But we are on the right road. We have a facility that was in very poor condition, was way outdated. That tent helped our animals and helped our staff incredibly. And if you remember the discussion in this chamber during that whole episode, and the result of it was volunteers and employees both understanding that things had gotten substantially better. They're going to get even better when we finish building the building that was approved by the voters by a substantial margin. So what we have here is a very difficult time. I don't see how you can claim you didn't know what was going on. I mean, if you're at all paying attention to the news and the actions of both the city and the county and all the other jurisdictions related to animal care, it's kind of hard to believe that you didn't know. And we've seen this routine before, not necessarily with the city of Tucson, but with other jurisdictions as well, and with other intergovernmental agreements. And frankly, it's baloney. So in all candor, that's probably not a very politic thing to say, and this won't be either. But I sincerely hope that with new management coming online at the jurisdiction of the city of Tucson, that our relationships start to improve and that there's better communication. And I think Mr. Huckleberry and his staff knows that it's incumbent on us to be better about that too, and that we simply need to start putting more things in writing. And we certainly have had this discussion in this chamber before about other matters with other jurisdictions related to cost sharing that we do. So this again is nothing new. This is not a surprise. This is merely something that we need to work on to make sure that we provide the best bang for the buck for what we're trying to accomplish in improving animal care services for everybody in this community. And I think we've gone a long way towards that, and I think we need to continue doing that. And frankly, I'm proud of the work of our staff and the work that's gone on in animal care, and I'm proud of the voters for voting for that new building, because it really is the right direction. It really is a more proper way to conduct government services, and it's something that everybody's going to have to get together and live with.
Thank you, Supervisor Elias.
Madam Chair,
Supervisor
I
Moore.
just have one final point that Supervisor Elias reminded me of is the costs of this facility, the maintenance and operations are going to increase as we have implemented the no-kill philosophy. We will be housing dogs for life that are unadoptable, that are sick, and that kind of thing. And we have numerous reports from various jurisdictions that have adopted the no-kill philosophy that their costs do in fact increase over time, because it's common sense. You're housing more animals, and if they're ill, you're having to treat them at the same time. You know, food, shelter, all of that does increase costs. So that's just a point that I would like to make sure that we communicate to the various jurisdictions and they're clear on. I know we kind of assume that people should know this, but it just appears to me that it's always something that they can throw back to us and say, you didn't communicate that these costs were going to be increasing. So I'd just like to make sure the City of Tucson, all of the jurisdictions are really clear that over time we're going to be housing more animals. The ones that are unadoptable, and I commend the people over there at PACC who have done a great job getting animals adopted in the program we have here with bringing animals to the board meetings. It's all, I think, great things that help get these animals adopted, but the ones that are unadoptable or ill are the ones that will cause an increase in costs, I think.
Any other comments from board members? Mr. Yeah, and I have one question, and then we can.
Yeah, I think, Madam Chair, we just need to be, I think, very clear. This is not a no-kill shelter. We still do euthanasia, and so we've gone from 40% to survival to 80% survival. We will not get to 100, so we are not, while we are trying to attempt to achieve no-kill in the community, this facility will not be a no-kill facility.
Well, that's interesting. What are the criteria for euthanasia? Do they have a set criteria?
Medical criteria and behavior criteria, vicious dogs, dogs that are not, cannot be, or animals that cannot be recovered with medical treatment. And we have to remember, there's a great deal of owner-requested euthanasia.
Yeah. What percentage are we at right now, did you say?
I'd say we're probably at 80% adoption.
80% adoption. Okay, thank you.
And I just want to make sure I understood from your memo that the city of Tucson is arguing about the overhead charges for FY 14 and 15, the administrative overhead charges, but they are acknowledging that those exist moving forward.
Madam Chair, yes. And it will be so delineated in the intergovernmental agreement.
Well, Mr. Huckleberry is seeking direction at this point. What's the pleasure of the board? It looks like under item 12, the Sheriff's Department incarceration, we will have that contract on the 16th. He is asking for direction regarding animal care and enforcement per his recommendations of his memo dated today. And I think the recommendations are item 1, 2, A, B, C, D, E, and E is the waiver, which has been the discussion point mostly here, of the administrative overhead charges for FY 14 and FY 15. Does the board want to give Mr. Huckleberry directions as staff continue the dialogue with the city of Tucson regarding the IGA?
Madam Chair. Go ahead, Ellen, please. Supervisor.
The only thing I wanted to be sure was incorporated, and Mr. Huckleberry agreed he was going to do that, is the Community Cats program, just to delineate that so everyone's really clear on that. Thank you.
Mr. Supervisor Elias.
Well, I would just say that, I think we need to continue on in the direction of the document that we have in front of us and continue to talk to them and get this done so that we have a completed agreement as quickly as we can and make sure that we're sharing those costs into the future and that we have all those things documented into the new intergovernmental agreement. I think that's the best we could do. And like I said, I hope that new leadership brings us a different way of being able to negotiate these types of agreements.
Supervisor Ballard has any comments?
Madam Chair, I just would reiterate, I'd be very hesitant unless a much better attempt was being made on the other side in terms of paying those funds that are due in terms of the administrative overhead. Again, as I said earlier, it's very telling to me that when those administrative overheads are being charged to us, we're supposed to pay them regardless of what's being done. But when there are administrative charges on the other side, oh, you didn't tell us. It smells poorly, and I would be very hesitant to go forward with a waiver of that full amount without a much better attempt being made by the city to pay those administrative fees.
And I don't know that if those fees are waived, I'm not sure I could support an agreement. I would ask the county administrator, I think Supervisor Valadez was interested in what the overhead for in terms of equity, the overhead for the other jurisdictions, what that amount is for the fiscal years 14 and 15, if we could get that information.
But Madam Chair, we can certainly provide that information to you. And the revenues, obviously, we're operating in the black, but obviously it's something that would have gone into our fund balance and to help us achieve, again, fund balances are there to help you weather tough times or unknown conditions. So it's possible, it's achievable that we can waive this, but what we will do is take your direction that basically looks at those items And we will structure the IGA and bring it back to you for adoption and final consideration on the 16th, and identify the areas that we think we still, if we have any disagreements with the city.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
Supervisor Valadez brought up a really good point regarding the overhead that is charged to us when they do the billing for us and we pay it back. Is it possible to do a negotiation and get some of that forgiven in exchange? You know, what's fair is fair.
Madam Chair, and members of the board, that was my first question to the city manager. It says, you don't want to pay $472,000 in overhead of the county. How about waiving my $400,000 plus overhead with regard to the sewer bill? And the answer is, oh, that's different.
Would you please pursue what the difference is? See if you can get the city manager to tell us how it's different and why.
And yeah, maybe it could be something that they don't have to give the cash out of pocket, but you know, we're in the same boat that they are in terms of fiscal issues this year.
Well,
Madam Chair,
Supervisor.
I'm not sure that we're quite comparing apples to apples here. I mean, I certainly understand that both sides should have the ability to negotiate costs of overhead and what they actually are. And I think that's Supervisor Valadez's point. There's nothing wrong with doing that, and you have to be real about it. So, if there's problems there with sewer billing and any overhead costs associated with that IGA, then straighten it out.
Well, I think it needs to be linked.
But it's not quite the same, because obviously we have made a lot of changes in animal care in the last couple of years, and they're for the better. That's the whole point. And folks have to understand that we're changing the way we do business, and that it's for the better of all of us, and that there are costs attached to that. That's the reality check that everybody needs to go through. If there are problems in other IGAs with overhead costs, then we ought to talk about each one of those and what that all means. But I think it's a little disingenuous to compare them without really knowing the salient facts behind all of that and what the cost changes would actually be. Is it wrong to walk away from a bill like Supervisor Valadez says? If I was to borrow $5 from him today, you know, he might want that $5 back. And if I said no, that's not a right way to treat a friend or a brother or anybody. So I certainly understand that logic, and that is applicable.
Well, I disagree with you, Supervisor Elias. I think these are reasonable comparisons. I disagree with Mr. Huckleberry when he said, well, he's correct. We can, quote, afford to eat the 400, almost 500,000. But again, it's not an issue of if we could. It's an issue of equity, and it's not been addressed.
And back to the point, Madam Chair, that was made earlier, was that everyone was real clear, and I believe the City of Tucson was fully supportive of the new philosophy and actually wrote opinions in support of the Animal Care Center, which means they should have been on board with the additional costs, because as we talked about earlier, it's kind of obvious the costs are going to increase, and everyone should have been aware of that. And when you go out and write an opinion supporting the new philosophy and the new shelter, I think that you need to be accountable for that.
And I think to Supervisor Elias's point, is it a fair comparison? We obviously disagree, but I would also point out that the city has a history of such behavior, and we continue to reward it, and that's what concerns me. I think we've exhausted this subject. If there are no further comments, I think, Ms. Huckleberry, you have your direction. And we'll move on to Juvenile Court, item 13, and Resolution 2015-33. What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair, I'm going to move item 13, including Resolution 2015-33.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on this item? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Moving on to Community Services, Employment and Trading, and item 14, the Local Workforce Development Area, and Resolution number 2015-34. What's the pleasure of the board?
approval of item number 14, resolution number 2015-34.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Any objections? Moving on to transportation, items 15, 16, and 17, and resolution 2015-35. What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair, I'll move items 15, 16, and 17, including resolution 2015-35.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Moving on to hearings, we have franchise license and permits, item 18 and 19. Item 18 has a sheriff's note, sheriff's report attached. And then if you move on to the addendum agenda, also a hearing, franchise license permit, item 12. These are hearings. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address us on items 18 and 19 on the regular agenda and item 12 on the addendum agenda? If not, what's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Elias.
I'll go ahead and move items 18, 19, and 12 on the addendum, close the public hearings, and make note of the sheriff's report related to item 18.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve items 18 to 19, close public hearing, approve item 12 on the addendum agenda. Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving to Forensic Science Center and item 20, hearing medical examiner fees, ordinance 2015-23. These are hearings. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address us on this item at this time? If
Madam
not,
Chair.
what's the pleasure of the board? Supervisor Elias.
Madam Chair, seeing no one come forward to address the board on this item, I'm going to move to close the public hearing and approve item 20, including ordinance 2015-23.
A motion and a second to
Madam Chair.
approve. Supervisor.
Just in terms of a short comment, I'd just like to say that I certainly appreciate the work that the medical examiner's office does in a very difficult situation, and we really should honor those people and thank them for their public service.
Thank you. Any other discussion or comments? If not, the motion's on the floor, and I'll call the question. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Again, we're on to hearings. Items 21, this is under Development Services. Items 21, it's a rezoning ordinance 2015-24. And item 22, again, a rezoning ordinance, ordinance 2015-25. These are hearings. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address us on these items at this time? If not, what's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair, seeing no one from board to address the board on these items, I'm going to move items 21 and 22, including ordinance 2015-24 and ordinance 2015-25, and close the public hearings, and hope that I don't get my knuckles wrapped by the Sisters of the Immaculate Heart of Mary.
Second. Motion and a second. Any further discussion, comments? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. We move on to the addendum agenda, and we've already dealt with items 1 and 2. We will move to item 3, revisions to personnel policy. What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair?
Supervisor Elias.
You know, I'm really glad to see this item has made it on the agenda, and bilingual pay is something that we've talked about for years in our community, and being able to fairly compensate employees for actual abilities that they have and present to the public as a service is important. So I'm very happy to move item 3.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any board discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to contracts and awards under community services. Item 4, Tucson Urban League. Under finance and risk management, item 5 and 6. And under item 7 under human resources, and then under procurement, items 8 and 9. Is there any objection to moving all these items now?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to move items 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to real property, item 10, in the Tucson Airport Authority. And then we have item 11, grant application acceptance actually, let's take that separately. I'd like to discuss that a little bit. So I'd entertain a motion for item 10.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 11, acceptance by the county administrator of a John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation grant to provide for the Safety and Justice Challenge program in the amount of $150,000. There's a motion and a second, but I want to congratulate all involved in acquiring this grant. And maybe Ms. Wheeler, you want to explain the grant a little bit?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Pima County is one of 20 jurisdictions from around the country that is receiving this grant. There were 191 applicants from 45 states, so it was quite a competitive situation. The aim of the grant is it's a planning grant, and the funding will be used by the county over the next 6 months. For our staff in a number of agencies, including the sheriff and the jail. There are some representatives here today. Byron Gwaltney, the corrections chief, and India Davis, the assistant chief, are here. We'll be using the money for a very in-depth planning process that will look at how our jail is used, what kind of people are being detained. Are we detaining the right people for the right amount of time? Or are there people who could be better diverted to treatment or released, cited and released, and so forth, and so that they do not incur the stigma of being in jail, and the county does not incur the costs of jailing those individuals who don't need to be in the jail.
Thank you, and congratulations to all involved. We do have a motion on the floor. Are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. And since we're on justice and law enforcement, I was negligent at the beginning of the meeting, but I really want to take the opportunity now to recognize Regina Nason. She received the Public Lawyers Award from the American Bar, or the Arizona Bar Association. She's a public attorney, received that award, so she's to be congratulated. And Tom, if you could convey our congratulations to her. And with that, if there are no objections, this meeting stands adjourned. Our next meeting is June 16th.